The woman's name is Amy Bock. I've already talked about her. Last week, a court in Minnesota gave her 41 years and 6 months. 41 years and 6 months. Not for murder, not for robbing someone on the street with a knife, but for taking money that was supposedly collected to feed hungry children. So the children remained hungry and she was stealing that money. $300 million for children's lunches that never existed. The lunches were imaginary, but the 41 years are absolutely real. And now the second number, I ask you to remember it for the next half hour. Not 300 million anymore, 520, 521 billion. Have you ever heard anything like that? 520? 521 billion? It's hard to even wrap your head around it, right? That's how much, according to American estimates, leaks out of taxpayers' pockets every year through a hole that for decades they didn't want to plug. They wanted to plug it but couldn't find it. They didn't want to plug it. Emmy bulk is just one drop, a drop, a drop. And today I'll show you the ocean, and here's the twist that's worth staying for. This is a story about a crime that put on two masks. One mask is called helping hungry children. The other is called cheap goods for you. And behind both masks is the same face. The face of people who decided to live well not because they produced something, but because they learned how to take things away beautifully from us. Easily. And it was them who finally got hit, at last. A blow that should make them stagger and fall, to stagger like they've never staggered before. By the end of this conversation, you'll be able to do one thing that almost no one arguing on the news can do. You will be able to hear any statement. Let's help these unfortunate people. In 3 seconds, you'll be able to tell if you're facing nobility or pain. Theft. Well, at least it's a theft plan covered up with noble words. That's a skill. Today I'm giving it to you. I've said several times already that it will start somewhere in the middle of June. I didn't mention a specific date. Around the 15th, yes. I said why exactly then the material should start reaching the American, viewer, consumer, whoever consumes the material, yes. The FBI was involved. Congress studied it. The prosecutor's office was collecting, folder by folder, building their case, holding on to it. Holding on to it, you might say. Yes, they were holding on to it deliberately, so as not to spill it, drop by drop, but to pour it out all at once, in one big splash, in front of the entire American public, right before what, have you already guessed? No, not before the Olympic Games and not before the launch, but before the elections. According to the original plan, this was supposed to happen after the Iran operation was over. Well, so that by the time the strike against corruption happens, things would already be leveling out, or at least inflation would be moving in that direction. Gas prices would go down and people would listen not while hungry, but in a calm state. Hungry is the wrong word. Not anxious, but calm. Well, the issue with Iran isn't settled yet. But who knows, maybe it will be resolved by the 15th. But it seems the Republicans looked at the calendar and decided that they can't just sit around waiting for better conditions anymore, and started taking action. It started exactly where it was expected, in Minnesota. Listen to the scale of it because the numbers here speak louder than any politician. In the case called Feeding Our Future, that very scheme with children's nutrition, 98 people have been charged. So far, these are all the people who carried it out. 64 have already been convicted. The Department of Justice sent out more than 1,700 subpoenas. They were checking absolutely everyone. They conducted over 130 searches. Just searches alone, 130. 1,000 witnesses. You understand that this isn't just about those people who are stealing something, right? This isn't, so to speak, a press conference being prepared. What's being prepared is like a dredger moving along the bottom, and the children's nutrition case is just an investigation. It's just a warm-up. Well, it's not me saying this. This is what we were told. Then something came up that honestly is truly chilling. The program to help children with autism. Help for children with autism. Well, we know approximately how many of those children there are. In 2018, under one of the Medicaid programs, bills were issued for $671,000. Okay. And in 2024, 6 years later, are you ready? for $342 million. Can you imagine? Do you even understand what they've done? 500 times more. Gentlemen, our autism problem has increased 500 times in 6 years. Not by 500%, which would already be terrible, right? 500 times? 500 times. The investigation claims that the fraudsters recruited families. They paid parents a monthly kickback and got fake diagnoses from doctors, meaning that completely healthy children were diagnosed with autism. You might say, well, in the end, yes, they billed the government, right? Do you know what that means? They weren't just stealing money, they were putting a lifelong label of illness on a healthy child, and that closed a huge number of doors for them in life. A huge number of doors in life. The foolish parents went along with it just for, well, a small monthly income. So what if they sign something? The money still comes in, right? In this situation, the child is not a person, like the Democrats always tell us. Oh, you're against children, right? The child is just a line item on the bill. And the Democratic Party, as I'll show you now, is rubbing their hands together just over this one issue. The current administration has already frozen $259 million for the state of Minnesota under the administration's program. Well, I mean, there's no point in continuing to pay for this nonsense without checking that 99 of these kids never had autism in the first place, right? 22 searches. 15 new charges, and the total estimated amount stolen in one state under this program is $9 billion. That's right, in just one state. And here comes a question that the state really doesn't want to answer. Hey guys, where was the governor during all this? Was he hanging out somewhere, or did he ever actually show up at work? The Congressional Oversight Committee, chaired by Comer, held a hearing and, well, came to a pretty clear conclusion. Governor Walz and the state's Attorney General Ellison, so the two people who were supposed to oversee all this, to have the apparatus for it, they were the ones responsible. They were put in place to watch over our money, right? As it turned out, they knew about this. I don't know if they knew every single detail, but they knew very well. And the governor didn't just look the other way. It wasn't just that they didn't have time because they had other, more important things to do, right? They silenced those who tried to raise the alarm. That's already a crime. Negligence is one thing, but this is a crime. Of course, that's a crime too. Go ahead and try to prove it if you don't see the money that, so to speak, changed hands, right? Those who would be called the conscience of the organization in a decent system were called a problem to be removed in this Minnesota system. Olds himself tried to run for a third term, was planning to, but now it's clear that he's not running. That's a signal for you too. The person is leaving not at the peak of popularity. And notice this honest detail. I'm not hiding it on purpose. The FBI opened this case back in 2021. That is, well, gentlemen, the first charges were formulated in 2022. This was under Biden, and that's important. This means that the current administration didn't invent an enemy out of thin air right before the elections. They opened a closet that had been filled for years but kept hidden. Filled, hidden, and locked up, and then they would put a lock on it. And the new administration started taking out what the Democrats had put in there. And by the way, let's be honest, some Republicans too. While no one is watching, let's quickly put it in. I think we've checked and found everything, right? We'll publish the results. Then they closed it and put it away for a long time, as they say. So you understand that these aren't random flashes, but a planned shooting machine. Take a look at how it's assembled. On January 8, a separate department for national anti-fraud efforts is established in the Ministry of Justice. It's not a commission or a working group, but an official department with its own chief. On March 16, the president signs a decree establishing a task force for the enforcement, prevention, and eradication of fraud. And he doesn't put a clerk in charge. You can always tell the level of importance by who is appointed as the head. The second most important person in the Republic, J.D. Vance, is appointed as chairman. By the way, that's no small thing. The vice president and most likely one of the 2 or 3 Republican Party candidates for the upcoming elections. That means in 3 years he could be running for president. Now, this commission and committee include 10 ministers. 10 ministers. The newspapers have already dubbed Vance the fraud czar, as they call it here, and Vance himself puts it this way. Vance sums up this election campaign in one phrase, and in my opinion, this phrase is brilliantly simple. He says the November elections come down to one question. I really hope that's the case. Do you want, and these are his words, people in Washington who fight for you or people who take from you? It's clear, right? Very nicely put, by the way, right? It's not left versus right, not progress versus reaction. It's whether they're thieves or not. Now try to come up with an anti-slogan against that. It's tough. And now, where will they dig next? After Minnesota, California is no longer a prediction. It's already started. The administration has suspended $1.3 billion in medical payments to California. Our system sends all taxes to Washington, where they're reformatted and sent back to states for specific programs. And now $1.3 billion has been stopped because, unfortunately, in my state, there's a hell of a lot of theft. Another billion was suspended under the home care program, the one used by about, how many is it? 900,000 elderly people, people with disabilities, where expenses were growing twice as fast as in the rest of the country. I have a lot of acquaintances whose parents came from the Soviet Union, of course, who are already retired or are disabled or something else, who use this program for this, for that, for a caregiver who comes twice a week, or to pay part of the rent. I mean, there are a lot of different needs. Really, it's great that the government, that the state, I'm ready to chip in part of my salary for that, so to speak. Honestly, I would prefer if this was done not by the state, but by a private charitable organization, but that's a different story. Vance directly named 3 states that, according to him, are not fighting theft enough. California was the first. He also mentioned New York and Hawaii separately. It's the same old COVID issue that leaves you speechless. You just wouldn't believe it. 20,000 inmates in California prisons received $140 million in unemployment benefits. I can't help but laugh. A person is sitting in a cell and getting benefits for losing their job. Well, there you go. Didn't you cross-check the lists of inmates and the unemployed? You don't have a computer. Do you even know what a computer is? Any accountant in a private company would be fired on the spot if he didn't cross-check A with B. California's total losses from COVID schemes are estimated to be up to $31 billion. I mean, it's not funny, but it's so absurd that it actually starts to become almost nervously funny. All right, Minnesota, California, and then, of course, the president personally oversees everything across all the states, with help from Congress and the prosecutor's office. They're casting the net very wide and, thank God, digging deep. Why thank God for digging deep? Because we need to uproot what we used to call the nomenclatura, and here in America they call it the deep state. That's why you need to be very thorough, and the shovel needs to have very sharp edges. And here I'll pause for a second and ask you for one thing. If you've listened this far, it means you do care about where the money goes. Ladies and gentlemen, money earned by your own hard work, even if you're retirees, please hit like right now. Not for me, but so that one more person who thinks this doesn't concern them will see this conversation. It does concern you no matter where you live, no matter which state you live in, it concerns you. Because the money that's sent here and stolen isn't being sent as aid or saved for the people who worked for it. And it would be better to give less to this stinking government, yeah. The more you give, the more they steal. The less you give, they still steal more, but it's not as upsetting. And now, the most important thing, the reason for all this mockery. I promised you a skill, how to spot a thief. No, not by the smell, by the slogan. Here it is. Remember one rule, I call it the critical rule, because it cuts off 90% of the lies. It sounds like this. If in order to carry out some proposal you have to take away a person's property, freedom, or life without their consent, then that proposal is a bad one. Repeat it again. It's a bad one. And here's what's important. It remains bad, even if taking from one person would make life better for a million others. Even then. Now apply this rule to something like mini Minnesota. Let's feed hungry children. Who would be against that? Let's help children with autism. Who would dare to object? Let's support the elderly at home. Well, that's just a noble cause, right? Do you hear how beautiful each slogan sounds? That's actually the trick. It's about taking our money, I would even say, blatantly taking our money. They always wrap it up in packaging with some noble word written on it, like help, care, justice. They especially love the word justice. Sometimes it's children, sometimes it's also the disabled, the sick, and so on, yeah. That's because under the wrapper with something written on it, it's really awkward to start lifting it up and say, hey, let me check it, okay? And that's exactly where everything is hidden, buried, as Gorbachev used to say, right? The dog dug there, I don't remember exactly. Anyway, that's where you need to dig. This is the portrait of the deep state. Whatever these people at the top do, they think about one thing, just one thing. No matter how much I checked, no matter how much I talked, no matter how deep I dug, they only think about one thing, how to get rich at our expense. They want to live well, that's it, untouchably. Criminals want to live well, everyone does, each one of them. We also want to live well. The crime is in how exactly you achieve this. Either you can produce or you can take away. Every act of taking is presented under the pleasant slogan of helping others.
Помощи несчастному.
And it looks incredibly noble. It just makes you want to cry. But in reality, to call things by their proper names, it's simply a vile desire to live at someone else's expense, dressed up in the clothes of virtue. And here I want for you to hear me very clearly. Charity is wonderful. Helping your neighbor is wonderful, but only when it is voluntary, when I myself decide to give from my own pocket with my own hand, but the moment help is given at gunpoint, like through a scheme, through forgery, through a twisted law, that's no longer charity, that's robbery. And the one who tells you, but it's for a good cause, just wants you to stand there and smile during the theft, and most importantly, not to resist. Remember, this is the face of someone smiling and telling you, it's for a good cause, it's noble. Yes, because now you will see it a second time in a completely different story, or so it seems. Because here they are, these are the same faces. Trump has recently returned to tightening import policies. At first, it seems like a totally different topic, shifting to trade and some dull percentages. But I want to connect it with what we just talked about, because this isn't a second topic, it's the same one. It's just, well, how should I put it, with lipstick on and dressed up differently. Look. On June 3rd, the administration announces new tariffs from 10 to 12.5 on goods from 60 countries. And this time, the justification isn't about protecting our own manufacturers. The reasoning is more subtle and, in my opinion, more honest. The investigation into unfair trade says these countries allow forced labor. What do we care? No. Slave labor, essentially, in one form or another. But slave labor, it's not ours, it's theirs, right? Because of this, because they use slaves whom they either paid almost nothing or didn't pay at all, putting them in prisons, let's say, right? They put goods on the shelves cheaper than we can and push us out, both from our own market and from others. You might say, wait a second. So we're losing income, we're losing jobs, we're losing production, simply because they blatantly cheat and keep some people as slaves? Yes. Yes. Now let's apply our critical rule to this. What is unpaid and forced labor? This is labor taken from a person without their consent, meaning it's fruits. That is, a person worked there, earned something, but they didn't give it to him. What he earned was taken from him, and his time was stolen. He worked and worked, and he got nothing for it, right? A person who gets nothing for his labor without his own consent is a slave. Time is the only thing a person has, a finite amount, and it can't be returned. Taxes can be returned, right? But time can't be returned in any way. If a product contains time stolen from a person, it's clear what contains means. It's built into the cost. From our point of view, this product isn't cheap, it's stolen, and we're participating in buying and distributing stolen goods. Even in our regulations, it's clearly stated that in the US, we shouldn't allow products that contain labor that hasn't been fully paid for, and not out of pity. It's written because stolen goods are still stolen, even if they look nice on the shelf and cost $1 less. As soon as you buy it, you're buying something stolen for cheaper, because it was stolen, but it's still stolen. Someone stole from the department store, came out, and offered to sell it to you for less. You see what's there and think, that's great, right? You took it, bought it, he went on, kept stealing more, kept selling more. That's the same mask, just in the form of Minnesota. The slogan was, let's feed the children, but underneath it was taking away from taxpayers. Here the slogan is, here's cheap goods for you, we care about you and your wallet. But underneath it is taking away. From the nameless person on the other side of the world who sewed this shirt while locked up. Different continents, different words on the wrapper, but the crime is the same. Someone decided to live better not by producing, but by taking away, and wrapped it up in a nice slogan, you will pay less now, I'll be honest. They argue about these tariffs in Europe too, calling the American conclusions exaggerated, almost absurd. They get offended when they're accused. They argue about some things. It's a legitimate argument, yes. And the percentages will keep going back and forth, but I'm not talking about percentages right now. I'm talking about the principle and the principle. A tangible product that hides labor taken from a person. It's a bad deal. It's a purchase where you, well, I don't know, are using something stolen, holding someone else's property in your hands, and they explain to you that it's normal because it's cheap. It's cheaper, right? Is it cheaper to buy something stolen? Well, then go to those guys who hang around outside the stores, the homeless people, and bring me that thing over there. I'll pay half the price. Let's connect the dots so that what you have in your hands is not a tangled ball, but a straight line. A government official who writes a fake diagnosis for a child just to get a payout. The person doesn't have autism at all, but they write in the records that he's autistic. A businessman who bought it feeds imaginary children and sticks you with a bill of $300 million. A prisoner receiving unemployment benefits from his cell and obviously sharing it with someone, you get the idea. A factory on the other side of the world that keeps people locked up so a shirt costs $1 less. Do you think these are 4 different stories from 4 different news sections? Gentlemen, this is one story. This is about a person who understood a simple age-old truth. Producing is hard, but taking away is easy. Especially if you learn to shout the right slogans. The only difference between them is the size of the sign they hang on the door and the lofty word help they say as they reach into your pocket. And now, why am I a person who doesn't like it when politics replaces thought? Still, I'm glad about this unfolding attack. I'm glad about it not because they're hitting the Democrats, but because they're hitting corruption. And that's not the same thing at all. It's not a blow against a party. Among the Democrats, in my view, there are plenty of honest, hardworking, sincere people, and I won't let myself lump them together with thieves. This is a blow against the worst that develops in any party when power is left unchecked for too long. And there are a bunch of states where, once they seize power, the Democrats never let it go. Somehow they manage to let in a huge number of illegals. In a way, their crimes are even worse than crimes. Somehow they manage either to persuade the public or do something so that the public's vote doesn't count. Like it doesn't matter who votes, what matters is who counts the votes. But somehow they do it, just like that. To them, we're not citizens, just a source they can draw from with pretty speeches. And you know what I really hope for? No, not for the patience in the ballots. I hope that a person who is used to thinking of themselves as independent, who, well, in any party, who doesn't like either side, and usually out of habit just checks the box on the left, right? Yes, we'll watch this analysis, we'll look at the drawn children, at the healthy kids with a bot diagnosis, at the whole life that's stuck to them. Try to free yourself from it as a prisoner, as an inmate. Half of the universities won't accept an inmate with unemployment benefits. That's the funniest part, right? And we'll turn away from those who allowed all this, did it, permitted it, or organized it not out of party malice, but out of simple human disgust. That's how it arises in me. How can you go and vote for them? Because there are things nearby for which it's shameful for a dishonest person to stand, no matter what color his party card is. That's why, for the sake of this feeling of pure, clear disgust toward theft under a slogan, it was worth laying all this out today. Free market, honest work, voluntary help. This is not ideology, gentlemen. This is clean hands and everything else, no matter how noble it sounds. It tries to wash itself clean, it tries, but it never will. If you want to get a calm analysis every day of what's really happening, and not just shouting from the TV, stay here on our main channel. I come out every day, sometimes even, like today, twice a day. And if you don't get enough news and want to get to the root of things, well, why is that? Is the volume under the slogan possible? Where does it come from? How does the freedom it can't handle actually work? How can we make it so that this either doesn't happen at all or happens as little as possible? There's a roadmap to freedom, a channel there, 2 analyses a week. For those who love to think, it's quite a unique quality of humanity. I hope that there is still some percentage among my viewers who love to think. Okay, subscribe to both and think always. Goodbye.